Welcome back to the Five Insider. The busiest man in football right now has joined me. David Ornstein is in the building. David, last night, West Ham, champions of Europe, sort of. Lots of reflecting going on about the result. Also about Declan Rice this morning. We've obviously seen West Ham kind of come out and say, look, he's given his all for the club. Potentially he could leave. Where are we at?
Well, first and foremost, congratulations to West Ham, who by their own admission are massive. And this is a monumental achievement, which I think they should be incredibly proud of. Yeah, it's Europe's third-tier competition, but if anybody wants to turn their nose up at it, just look at the scenes of celebration that West Ham have embarked upon, that Roma did previously. And what it can do, it can take you into the Europa League by winning it. It can also provide a foundation for future progress and success. And I think West Ham will be waking up with some sore heads, but a lot of 100%. Hope in their hearts as well. I think it's now time for Declan Rice to depart. That's not my view. It's the view and the comments of David Sullivan, West Ham's owner. And he has been on TalkSport and said that Declan Rice will essentially be leaving. Now, there will be a period where, of course, offers need to come in and West Ham need to decide where they would like to agree terms and what suits them best in terms of payments and destination and loads to do with those negotiations. That doesn't happen instantly. But clearly the sense very evidently has been that Arsenal have prioritised him as their top target for this summer. And they appear to be at the front of the queue. There is interest from elsewhere. We've seen it's been well documented that Bayern Munich and Thomas Tuchel are very keen and have held some kind of discussions. We've seen Manchester United linked to him as well, Newcastle United too, Chelsea, which has a previous link to him from where he began his career before being released, I think it was as a 14-year-old. But I sense that consensus across the industry is that Arsenal will try and press on with this and rapidly to try and strike an agreement. Now, it doesn't mean that will happen. This is a huge financial outlay for them, for anybody else. Sorry, I didn't mention in there that there have also been reports that Manchester City may try and get involved in this. So there is competition there. And that will play into West Ham's hands because they might try and drive the price higher. But I think for their purposes as well, it would be sensible to get this done and dusted, provided they're happy with the terms, as soon as possible, because they need to then recruit replacements. David Sullivan talked of perhaps having multiple players to replace Declan Rice. And so that means these are sort of key days in determining his future. From everything we know, Arsenal appear to stand the best chance and have made the most headway, but that doesn't mean it's at a conclusion yet. I just think that the end is nigh for now for Declan Rice at West Ham. I think everybody there understands and respects it, from the boardroom to the fans, teammates and staff, and I'm sure they'll wish him well. But now it's about thrashing out the actual arrangement, and that's why these moments are going to be critical.
What sort of fee do you think we could be looking at for Declan? Because obviously we've seen this week Jude Bellingham, who we're going to come on to touch upon a bit later on, the move for a massive amount of money. Could we be talking about potentially British record transfer, or is it like to be a bit lower?
Well, Declan Rice has a year left on his contract with an option held by the club of a further year, which is essentially 2 years. But I think West Ham always recognised this as the right time to sell. There was interest in him in the summer of 2022, but they were very clear in saying he's going nowhere unless something ridiculous comes their way. He'll go and have a good World Cup, which he did, and then they'll agree to grant him his wish of moving on and playing Champions League football, ideally. So the duration left on his terms dictate the fee a little bit. So does the market. When you look at Jude Bellingham and Enzo Fernandez, you see fees in excess of 100 million euros. You suspect it won't be too dissimilar for Rice when you do the euros to pounds conversion. That goes below 100 million pounds. I've heard suggestions in past months of maybe 85 upwards. you imagine that would go higher given his form, his stock, the competition for his signing. The only thing I'd say on the competition is that from those you speak to, well, let's take Newcastle. Very keen, but does Declan Rice want to make that move? He seems very settled in London and focused on maybe more established clubs at this stage in their modern history. Then Manchester United, there's a lot of uncertainty over their ownership and what budgets they have available. So while some level of conversations may have taken place, I don't sense that they are going to press through with this. Manchester City always tend to be in these conversations for top players, and especially when they may be losing Gundogan. Let's see what happens on that, because they would like to retain him, but we know his contract situation. There's a bit of uncertainty over Calvin Phillips. I think Man City would be open to letting him go, but I'm not sure he wants to go at this point so early in his Man City career. So there's definitely some work to be done in that Man City midfield. Of course, Mateo Kovacic is a target of theirs. But players like Declan Rice will always be in that conversation, though I don't think they're as advanced as certainly Arsenal have been. When you think of Bayern Munich and their concrete interest, you also need to consider whether Declan Rice would want to move over to Germany in the Bundesliga at this stage, with young family, his roots in London, and the interest from the Premier League, and say perhaps that's unlikely. And so by process of elimination, with Chelsea not in the Champions League, and I think quite a lot of water under that bridge from what was perceived to be a pursuit when Frank Lampard was permanent manager, and it didn't come to fruition. That will be remembered, so will his departure from the club. And it's a period of transition there as well, which makes you think perhaps they're not at the front of the queue when they've already got Enzo Fernandez in. They've been heavily linked with Moises Caicedo, who might be slightly lower in transfer fee and salary, and various other players. By process of elimination, it's kind of led us to the point where Arsenal are at the forefront. And if he does want to go there, which some reports have suggested, and they are the most concrete party coming to West Ham, then you'll have an equation where you can't drive the price up to somewhere ridiculous. And you need to find a fee that's amicable to all.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned him there. I think we should touch upon Jude Bellingham as well. It is a big career choice to choose to go to Spain, isn't it?
It's a massive choice, but Liverpool were heavily linked, probably most heavily linked for many months and even years. But when push came to shove, and I revealed it in March, it was looking increasingly unlikely that they could do it based on the financial strength of their rivals for his signing, most notably Real Madrid and Manchester City. And also, it became clear that they had a desire to spread their budget across a number of acquisitions. Just as we record this, they've announced the signing of Alexis McAllister, and you suspect there will be more to follow, rather than putting all of their budget into one particular player. They also don't have Champions League football next season, which may have been a factor. Manchester City were very keen, but in April time, they were informed of Jude Bellingham's preference to move to Real Madrid. And beyond that, Manchester United have always been keen on him. Chelsea have always been keen on him, but that doesn't mean that anything was likely to develop on this occasion. So then it was about trying to strike a deal with Real Madrid. They have very cordial, strong relations with Borussia Dortmund. And so in recent weeks, I think dialogue has taken place. They had to be quite sensitive around the Bundesliga run-in and Dortmund going for the title. But once that situation was dealt with, I think it gathered pace very smoothly. I think Real Madrid would have wanted to pay a lower fee than they have ended up paying, but Borussia Dortmund would have held out for an even higher fee, knowing that even in a year's time, they probably could have got a respectable amount of money. And that brought them to the point they reached, which was, I think it's 103 million euros with 30% to come in potential add-ons, a decent compromise. And this is a 19-year-old, one of the best talents in world football. We're extremely lucky to have him as an English starlet, and we should support him and back him and protect him as well, because it's very early in his developmental stage, and now he's at arguably the biggest club in world football. when you see their drive towards youth in terms of their midfield rebuild, whatever happens with Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, they're coming towards the end of their careers. We've already seen Aurélien Tchouaméni come in for best part of 100 million euros last summer. And this continues that. They're going to need to do more investment in front because Karim Benzema's left, Marco Asensio too, even Eden Hazard. And so there's an opportunity there to join Real Madrid, be part of this exciting redevelopment of their squad and lead them into the future. And I think one important point to mention when many people say it's a real shame for the Premier League that we don't get to see Jude Bellingham, well, I think it's a 6-year contract at Real Madrid. And who knows, maybe he will spend the rest of his career there. Some players do. But it's also not inconceivable that at some point at a really good age, he comes to the Premier League and shines there, while also continuing his progress at national team level. So I think it had become really a one-horse race. And that was because Real Madrid were his preference. They went to town to make that clear to him and set up the right package and do the process properly, which would have been really important to Jude Bellingham and his family. His father, Mark, looks after his career. And it's come to a conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Real Madrid obviously moving very swiftly at the moment. I mean, could we see a bit of an English takeover of Madrid? We've seen Jude Bellingham going there. Could we also see Harry Kane going to Madrid?
Well, that's the logical next question, because Karim Benzema in particular has departed. And I think that was somewhat unexpected. They would have liked him to have gone one more year, which I think he was under contract for. And there are not many number 9s in the market. And furthermore, there are not many who will guarantee you the level of goals that Benzema provides. And that's why Harry Kane is at the top of Real Madrid's wanted list. They've been quite clear, whether it has been through off-record briefings or otherwise, that they would like to sign him. And they're going to try to do so. However, it's going to be extremely difficult because, as far as we know, Tottenham and in particular Daniel Levy do not want to let Harry Kane go. If they're going to consider it, it's going to take a really high fee. I think the likes of Real Madrid will test the water. We know that Erik ten Hag would really like to sign him at Manchester United too, but that will come down to their budget and the potential ownership situation. And then Daniel Levy will have a decision to make. I don't think he does right now because we're not aware of the offers being there and at the level that would give him food for thought. Then he'll need to decide whether I entertain those conversations or whether I stand by my guns and keep Harry Kane, give Ange Postecoglou, the new Tottenham head coach, one of the best strikers in world football, go into next season, try to bring a positive feeling to the place, a clear vision and progress that Tottenham are something to be reckoned for, and not give up hope that Harry Kane will sign a new contract despite being in his final 12 months. And if he is to leave as a free agent in 2024, which would be a bitter blow to Daniel Levy and Tottenham because they would recoup nothing for their star man, and he could even join a rival, which they're so desperate to avoid now, then at least they will feel that they can get a huge amount out of him in the final year, which will perhaps mitigate some of the damage. From Harry Kane's perspective, as far as I know, he is open to all opportunities, including Real Madrid. I'm not aware that he would not play outside the Premier League, like some have suggested, and that he would only want to stay here and break Alan Shearer's goal-scoring record. To be honest, that's probably going to be broken by Erling Haaland, the way things are going at some point. I think he would entertain the idea of Real Madrid or others. But in those options, I include Tottenham Hotspur because Harry Kane, his family, they love Spurs. There's Tottenham supporters. It would do them no greater pleasure than to succeed, win trophies, compete in the Champions League with Tottenham. That is their ideal scenario. But we're not living in an ideal world, and that's why they are open to everything. I don't sense they're agitating like some perceive them to be in the summer of 2021. I think there is communication on this occasion with Daniel Levy, which there wasn't at that time. And so I think things are very calm for now. I think if he stays, he's in a strong position. He can see how it goes. It may go well, or it may not go so well. He may sign a new contract, or he may leave as a free agent and finally be the author of his own destiny after this long and well-documented contract. And it would also give Real Madrid a real quandary, because who do they go for if they don't get Harry Kane? Maybe a Lautaro Martinez at Inter Milan has been suggested to me and reported in certain quarters. But beyond that, top goal scorers proven for Real Madrid's style and levels of expectation. We're all talking about the likes of Osimhen. There are some suggestions in Italy that his asking price might be a little bit lower than initially reported, but is that the right player for Real Madrid in terms of the way he scores his goals? Yeah. And then you go to the likes of Kolo Muani, Haaland. We're talking about the same names from Manchester United, and you know, it's why we've seen someone like Kai Havertz linked to Real Madrid, because they're looking for potential solutions, and that will, you know, play into Tottenham's thinking as well. The value of the player that they've got now, and what else they could get from the market to replace him. I do sense from conversations that they would look, if he was to go, so we're talking hypothetically, to promote Richarlison into that main role, because he does lead the line for the Brazil national team. And people might turn their noses up at that because of his goal-scoring record so far at Tottenham and in his career, but they brought him in for big money, and they might look to use him in that central role and then supplement with other signings in the position that he was in terms of that secondary level. We'll cross that bridge when it comes to it, but this number 9 market, the demand is so much higher than the supply, and that's a crucial factor in the consideration for Daniel Levy and anybody else in his position.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Daniel Levy's going to be looking to make some big signings, like you said there, potentially another striker if Harry Kane hypothetically was to leave. And we've also seen reports this week linking them with players across the squad. Harry Maguire, quite notably, in some very reputable outlets. What are your thoughts on Harry Maguire and his potential future at Manchester United?
Well, the situation is pretty clear. And Erik ten Hag has spoken quite candidly about it as well. He likes Harry Maguire. He's got great respect for him. And to be one of his centre-back options in a Champions League squad, I don't think that's too shabby at all. He's a seasoned international that always delivers for England. His record there is pretty much unblemished. It hasn't been the greatest time at Manchester United, but I don't think Erik ten Hag would be disappointed if he stayed and would use him. So that shifts this over to Harry Maguire and what he wants to do, because I don't think this situation is satisfactory for his career at club or international level. And that's why there will be conversations to be had. There will be interest in him. We've seen Tottenham linked. I think Tottenham really will respect what level of player he is, but also the character, the sort of leader that he would bring to any camp, the leadership, He's good friends with Harry Kane from international level, so I don't think this is a sort of equation of one in, one out, or a swap of sorts. I think if he was to go somewhere like that, it would be to play together, ideally. But I'm not aware of it being advanced with Tottenham or anybody else. We've seen others linked with him as well. I think Aston Villa, West Ham, and there will be more. And this will be a really interesting scenario. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Harry Maguire does leave Manchester United. And then that's the point at which they will look to recruit a backup or a new central defender. I think there would need to be a departure from that department at United for one to come in. And so, nothing concrete on Harry Maguire now, but it's certainly a possible departure, and the level of interest doesn't surprise me. Yeah, I mean, let's touch upon Manchester United. Loads of Manchester United viewers, of course, watching the 5 YouTube channel. Where are we at with some of the other transfers? You know, Mason Mount, heavily linked. You mentioned the striking department earlier. Lots of options, constantly linked. Are there any updates you can give us about Manchester United? So Mason Mount is a key target for that number 8 role. Erik ten Hag would like to sign him. I revealed that Mount is leaning towards joining United, which has since developed into reports that he has agreed personal terms. Whatever the precise accuracy, personal terms won't be a problem on that one. It's all about agreeing a fee between clubs. We know there has been interest from the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, Thomas Tuchel on behalf of Bayern Munich, but Manchester United being his preference and the other clubs knowing about that puts them in the driving seat. It doesn't mean that we're at the end of this by any means, however, because although there has perhaps been some dialogue between executives from both clubs. They played towards the end of the season. They were sharing a boardroom, and it doesn't take much to pick up the telephone or meet and have some conversations about this. But Chelsea's expectation is a high fee. As far as I understand it, £70 million plus £10 million in add-ons. And Manchester United and his other suitors will expect to be paying considerably less than that. I don't know the precise figure, whether it's 40, 45, with a hope that you'll compromise on 55. This is a player with 1 year left on contract, and the contract situation has been vastly spoken about by me and others. It's not been in a great place with Chelsea, but they do still hold his contract, and they could theoretically force him to see out that final year or make one final pitch to get him to renew, however unlikely that may be. It would be a gamble, especially with them needing some departures, but those departures can come from elsewhere. You know, you look across the squad: Aubameyang, Havertz, Ziyech, Gallagher,
Pulisic,
Chalobah, and others. Maybe Mendy will leave too. So there's been lots said and written about the financial fair play situation. Of course, it's a consideration, but perhaps it's not as dire as some have made out, because there are options there for Chelsea. I do think it will still be most likely that Mount will leave, but I'm not aware of this being close. I think a lot still needs to be done to bring it to fruition. Manchester United clearly have a budget that they need to work around until there's clarity over their ownership situation. There was a feeling a while ago they need to sell before they buy. There is some manoeuvrability within that. Perhaps you can, under the existing ownership, do that midfielder or do the striker, which is, of course, the main priority, the number 9. But once there's clarity over the ownership situation, I think it opens up a little bit for them in terms of possibilities and a bit more manoeuvrability. And that means these are really sort of key days for Manchester United. And it doesn't mean things will come about quickly. And that's the point to mention to the audiences. But it doesn't mean that United don't have sort of plans in place, irons in fires, lots of conversation going on and talks and exploring options, first choice options, second choice options. It's just what they're able to do. And that largely is in the hands of the Glazers at the moment. Yeah,
I mean, the ownership situation, every single time we sit down in these chairs, we talk about it, don't we? But we did see yesterday another update. It seems Sheikh Jassim has submitted a 5th bid for the club, a sort of take it or leave it offer, with a hard deadline, potentially even written in there as well. Do we think that now the season is over for United, the FA Cup final has been lost, no more games, this is going to progress quicker, or is it still up in the air?
Well, the amount of times you and I have talked about deadlines.
Ridiculous.
And it appears this is a self-imposed one from Sheikh Jassim's camp and the Qatari-backed bid. It's really hard to decipher exactly where this is up to, not only from our perspective, but I think inside Manchester United as well, because truly only the Glazers and those very much in their inner sanctum know the precise detail and plan, and maybe even they themselves don't know, because there's this talk of a bit of division among the family members over who wants to do what in terms of the siblings, with the consensus being that Joel and Avram would like to stay on in some capacity and some of the others might like to cash out as soon as possible. What has emerged in recent weeks is that the Sir Jim Radcliffe Ineos backed bid feels that it's in a really strong position, and they've gone into detail in the negotiations, evidently, and there's optimism that they will win through in the end, which would seemingly be a partnership with the Glazers initially, with the potential to take over completely further down the line. When the reports emerged about this 5th bid, well, I thought they had already made their final bid, and that seemed to be the briefing that was coming out last time. Now they say this is the final bid, take it or leave it, but it will remain on the table. We just won't enter negotiations beyond Friday. It's quite confusing. The perception across much of the industry is that may have been a sort of frustration, an exercise in public relations to an extent, to say, look, we've tried our best. If we're losing momentum in this situation. I don't think they've given up hope completely, but clearly it seems there's momentum on the Sir Jim Ratcliffe side. You speak to people, they think, maybe 5 to 10 days that there'll be some kind of clearer picture on this than we've received so far. But I don't say that with much confidence.
Yeah.
I don't profess to provide concrete information where I don't have it. So the only thing I do know is that there is a real desire that we've spoken about before inside Manchester United for this one way or the other to be done and dusted, so they can get on with what they want to do on and off the pitch. Even when this takeover comes, it's important to point out to those watching and listening that financial fair play is a real consideration for Manchester United. I think there was an overspend last summer, most notably the resources that were ploughed into the Casemiro deal. They couldn't do much in January. We saw it was only really Weghorst and Marcel Sabitzer who came in. Erik ten Hag would clearly like to do more business. I think Harry Kane's at the forefront of his mind. Mason Mount. We've seen other midfielders linked. We've seen defenders linked, centre-back in particular. Goalkeeper, if David De Gea was not to sign that contract, which feels like his part is signed, but maybe Manchester United have not fully signed it off yet. There were recent reports, I think the Telegraph said that there's also a desire for a left-sided wide player too.
Let's just take a quick U-turn though before we wrap up, because the story that you broke, one of the leaders on, has happened this week. One of the biggest stories in football, of course, Lionel Messi choosing to join Inter Miami. Give us some of the background on that one.
Yeah, we talk about seismic moments for Jude Bellingham, for example, English football, Real Madrid, the player himself, and various others. The movement of many players towards Saudi Arabia and everything that entails. There are so many different big situations in football at the moment. Manchester United's takeover, not least. But Lionel Messi moving to the MLS has massive ramifications. The background to this is that they'd been working on it for 2 years or more. Been spoken about in various quarters. It was a stated desire of Inter Miami, the Mas brothers who own the club alongside David Beckham. Messi has links himself to Miami in terms of the South American community there. I think he has a home there, his father too. And so there was always a desire at some point to move in that direction. What I revealed in October was that Inter Miami were growing increasingly confident of pulling this deal off, and that although it wasn't fully agreed, they did by that point expect him to be coming in, and that negotiations would pick up after the World Cup. And while PSG still wanted to retain him to a new deal, and Barcelona wanted to bring him back to the new camp, Inter Miami felt that they could bring him to the MLS. Matt Lawton said similar in the Times. There were lots of counter reports, and that's because there was lots going on behind the scenes. We saw PSG's stance initially before they accepted his departure. We saw Barcelona, or some within Barcelona, trying everything to make it happen. Maybe, judging by Messi's public comments in the last 24 hours, not everybody. Then we saw Saudi Arabia enter the fray, which would have been the highest financial offer and the most lucrative deal. He's an ambassador for Saudi Arabia as well, so there are links there. But clearly this wasn't all about the money, because he ultimately has gone for the option of Inter Miami. And with that comes some really interesting possibilities and ways of funding it. The MLS have a massive deal with Apple. They sponsor a documentary series, and we've reported on The Athletic that if there's an uplift in some of their proceeds,
which there will be,
audiences post Messi, then Messi could be entitled to a share of that. Adidas has a sponsorship deal, of course, with the MLS, all of their kits and boots, and has its own lifetime deal with Lionel Messi. And if they experience an uplift as a result of this move, some could come his way. And so the package, I'm sure, will be substantial for Lionel Messi either way. But I think what this says is that the MLS is not only still here amid the rise of Saudi's Premier League, an aggressive rise that is, and one that we could talk about in its own right, their ambitions, their population, the youth, the way they're filling stadiums, and the PIF has bought the top 4 clubs there, and they're trying to attract some of the biggest names in world football after Ronaldo and Benzema. That the MLS has held its own and is looking to catapult forward to advance. The Apple deal has helped them do that already. The 2026 World Cup is on the horizon. Would you bet against Lionel Messi making it through to that and trying to retain his World Cup trophy with Argentina? Many more players are now going to be attracted to come to the MLS off the back of Messi, who's well into his 30s, but still playing high-level football. And many felt that he would have tried to continue that in Europe and in the Champions League and break more records. You don't often see players with that level and ambition move over to the MLS. And that says to the world that they're a serious player in global football. They've got massive ambitions, and they've pulled off with what I would say is their biggest ever transfer, maybe even eclipsing David Beckham himself, Pele and others. And I think this is an amazing story and still needs to be finalised, but it's going to be an explosion of news. It already has been, and that's set to continue. And I think eyeballs are going to be trained on the MLS and watching him fly in America in what is a critical time for football in that country over the next few years. Yeah,
absolutely. And keep your eyeballs tuned to the 5 YouTube channel and to David Ornstein's social media accounts. Of course, over the transfer window, he's going to be the busiest guy in England. I can guarantee that. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. If you did enjoy this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. See you later.